Flight training is expensive, there's no question about that. How much you spend on flight training, though, depends largely on you. So the real question is, are you willing to put in all the hard work to make it affordable? I like simplicity, so let's try to keep things simple. One of the biggest myths is that you need a pilot or an aeronautics degree in order for you to become a pilot. That is simply not true. If your goal is to become an airline pilot, some airlines still require a 4-year degree, but it doesn't have to be in aviation. Better yet, if all you're trying to do is become a commercial pilot or a private pilot, you don't need a degree to begin with. There are 2 main ways you can get pilot education. You can either go through a college program, or you can go through a flight school. If you do a college degree, keep in mind that it will be expensive, and you'll end up taking classes that you probably won't need for your aviation career, and it will take 2 to 5 years depending on the degree and the program that you choose. Going through the flight school, it will be cheaper. You won't have to do any extra classes because all you will be focusing on is your certificates. The biggest advantage with a regular flight school is that it's flexible, whereas with a college program, it'll take you 2 to 5 years to get all your certificates and ratings, and in a degree, you can get all your certificates done at your own pace at a flight school. And it might even take you as little as a year depending on how ambitious you are and how much work you're willing to put into it. There is no right or wrong way to get flight training. If you have the means and you have the time and you would like to end up with an aviation degree, go ahead and do the aviation program. But if you're trying to save money and you're trying to get through everything fairly quickly, I would choose the flight school. A couple little tidbits. If you go through the college program, it doesn't necessarily mean that the quality of education will be better than if you go through a flight school. Also, if you decide to become an airline pilot and you go through the college program, keep in mind that your cost will be about $100,000, maybe $200,000. And when you get into the right seat of a jet at some airline, you'll probably only be making $30,000 a year. If you're looking for an aviation university, it's pretty easy. You Google it and then you compare and contrast the costs and what they offer and whatnot. If you want to look for a flight school, it's a little bit different, but it's still relatively easy. You go to skyvector.com, and this is basically an online aviation chart. Now, you'll see a bunch of stuff that you don't really need. If you click layers and then deselect each of the things that are checked, you will be left with a map of the United States. Now, if you know where you live, that's a big plus because you can zoom in and see what airports are around where you live. On the map, blue or magenta circles indicate airports, and that's what you want to focus on. If you go ahead and right-click on one of the circles, you can click on the airport name and that'll take you to the airport page. On the airport page, there's a bunch of information about the airport, but if you scroll down towards the bottom, it'll list all the services that the airport has to provide. In this case, the Cape Girardeau Regional Airport has pilot instruction, which is what we're looking for. So now that you've confirmed that the airport has flight instruction, you can go ahead and search for the airport in Google. That'll take you to the actual airport page where you can find flight instruction and what the rates are and what kind of airplanes they have and then what kind of certificates they can train you for as well. And once you find a few airports and maybe a few flight schools, I would go ahead and compare them and see what they offer and how much the training is. A couple little tips. When you look at the rental rates, see if they do dry leases or wet leases. Dry lease is just the airplane and then you pay for the fuel separately. In a wet lease, the price of the fuel is included in the price of the rental. Something else you could check into is see if the flight school will rent the flight time by the hour, or sometimes they'll do block hours where you can buy a block of, let's say, 10 hours at a time, and that tends to be cheaper than paying hour by hour. As counterintuitive as it might sound, fly often. You'll remember a lot more and your training will go a lot quicker since you won't have to remember things. So I'd shoot for maybe 2-3 times a week as opposed to once a month. Another huge cost savings is studying on your own. Believe it or not, but you don't need an instructor for a lot of your studying. There are some subjects that are difficult, but for the most part, you can grasp it all yourself and read it all by your lonesome. Just because your flight school has fancy airplanes doesn't mean you have to fly them. They might have a retractable gear airplane or a complex or a multi-engine or a high performance or something fancy with fancy instruments and displays and whatnot. But if you don't need to fly them, you don't necessarily have to fly them. You can fly something with steam gauges and save a bunch of money instead of flying a glass panel airplane for $200 an hour. If you remember anything from this video, it's this. Don't wait to be taught. Seek the information yourself, learn it yourself, and don't wait to be spoon-fed by your instructor. If you don't have the motivation to sit yourself down and read and study, then it's going to take a lot longer and you're going to spend a lot more money in the end. Here are some practical tips that will help you save money during flight training. I know it might sound counterintuitive at some points, but believe me, it'll make a difference. First of all, know your airplane. More specifically, know your pilot's operating handbook or POH. Either get it from the flight school, buy it online, or find it in the airplane and take pictures of it, but you need to read that thing cover to cover, and you need to know where to find the information, what section it's in, and roughly what it says. On your drive to your flight school, you can call 1-800-WX-BRIEF and get a weather briefing for your upcoming flight. Once you get to the airport, you can get the actual weather at the time. You can do your takeoff and landing performance and see how much runway you will need for the takeoff and for the landing. And you can also compute center of gravity limits for your weight and balance. And believe it or not, all that can be done without an instructor. Now, your instructor might not have you do all that for every flight, but it will benefit you a lot in the long run. Depending on your flight school and airplane availability, you can actually go through and pre-flight the airplane. You can walk around, look at all the parts, make sure they're all there, and you can also check the required documents that they're on board. One of my pet peeves as a flight instructor was having a student show up and then me and them going out to the airplane and pre-flighting it for 30-40 minutes. To be honest, that's a waste of my time and that's a waste of your money if you're just having the instructor watch you as you pre-flight. So you can do that all by yourself. One other thing you can do is read ahead, as I mentioned before. You can read up on the maneuvers that you will be doing, or you can read what you don't understand from the previous lesson. That way you're ahead of the game when it comes to actually flying. And believe it or not, the POH has quite a few little nuggets that might help you. I hope you found this at least a little bit interesting. I know I probably missed something, so leave a comment or a question below. And until next time, have fun, fly safe, and always keep learning. See you next time.